Hello and welcome, Halan Wasalan. If everyone could please take their seats. It's nearly 6 minutes after 2 o'clock on a lovely sunny day in London, which emphasizes just how committed you are to the next session, that you've all showed up more or less on time. The session is called Conflict, Humanitarian Crises, and the Limits of Multilateralism. And you know, it's a pretty good title. It pretty well sums up the situation in Yemen, where a civil war between the internationally recognized government, backed by a Saudi-led coalition of Arab states, against the Houthi rebels linked to Iran, has created, as I'm sure everyone here knows, one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. But it's a very good time to focus on Yemen, which has sadly been eclipsed by a lot of other crises confronting the world. An even better time because it is a moment of cautious hope. Cautious hope because of the recent de-escalation in tension in the region, stemming from the rapprochement between the two regional heavyweights, Iran and Saudi Arabia, and that has allowed the biggest multilateral organization working in Yemen, the United Nations, to try to accelerate progress on a national dialogue and to reinforce an informal, shaky truce, but still a truce which is largely holding. And one of the many questions we want to explore today in a conference which is focusing on multilateral institutions is whether the United Nations and other multilateral bodies, which have tended to focus on making peace and handing out food aid, whether they could be involved in something to establish something more fundamental, like building the state. Today's session is on the record. It's being recorded. We encourage you to amplify the conversation by tweeting. The hashtag, I'm sure you know it already, is hashtag CHLondon, and you can also ask some questions towards the end of the conversation. Just politely raise your hand in the best of British traditions, and a microphone will come to you. And for those of you who are joining us online, we also have something here, a means here for me to see the questions. And if we're going to talk about state building, what better person to have than a gentleman with a master's and a doctorate in architecture and design. Welcome to the Prime Minister of the internationally recognized government, His Excellency معين عبدالملك Saeed. Thank you very much for making time to spend time with all of us. He has been the Prime Minister since 2018, and the Prime Minister has held almost every job and every priority that has confronted the Yemeni government. He's been the Minister of Public Works and Roads. He was a member of the Conciliation Committee during the National Dialogue. He was the rapporteur during the Constitutional Drafting Committee. He was even on the streets during those protests of the Arab Spring. He is a doer, but he's also a thinker. So, Prime Minister, we're going to allow you to make some opening remarks, and I'm told he's not just going to make remarks, he's going to set out a new paradigm. Throw it out to all of us to think out of the box, throw away the box, and try to find a different way to work in a country torn by conflict and move them away from conflict. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Liz. And I will tackle this topic. Tackle this topic from a different perspective, other than the prevailing paradigm about countries on conflict, which humanitarian always priority. Humanitarian, but not state institutions. But before that, let's ask an argument. Why conflict countries, or what sustain conflict countries not to fall in total chaos? In Yemen, for example, we have 8 years of severe war. What's preventing or keep us survive or floating? We are on the cliff. We are typically fragile state, conflicts, worse humanitarian crisis, but we're still floating. We are over the cliff to fall down, to lose all the state institutions, and we see that's happening in Sudan and in different countries. So we will talk through these arguments, and we can call it the pillars of stability. And how important is this? And also we can assess the multilateral interventions, which in case of Yemen, and also it can reflect in all fragile countries or countries in conflict. And I will take some examples, or we will talk about some examples, and how we can put some ideas for the multilateral system to intervene for the states that on a failure situation, because it seems that the system always supporting sustainability or sustain the government or the countries, but not intervene in countries in collapse. Following the Russian war on Ukraine, it was one of the big shocks for the government. 90% of our imports of wheat came from outside. 50% of it came from Russia and Ukraine. We don't have fiscal capabilities to deal with the prices. Nobody wants to deal with country in a danger, banking system, private sector. Many countries put constraints on their exports of wheat. Everybody wanted in cash. Nobody, all the rich countries and other countries can survive. What we can do in Yemen. We don't have also money to build stocks for the wheat. So it was one of the critical, deadly shock that we ever faced in the government. We work with the private sector and entirely process so we can secure all the wheat. Sometimes we reach approximately 2 weeks or 3 weeks reserve, but we keep confidence and make the people not panic, and then we survive that with the less increase on the prices of wheat in the region. So the private sector and resilient who keep us floating during this time. That's why the state institutions is important. Even with the shortcoming, with all the weakness, is important to work as a state institutions with the resilience of the private sector. So this is one of the issues. Even the IMF designed programs like food shock window. We are not eligible for that. It was out of our reach. And I think not only Yemen, but other fragile countries or countries in conflict was out of that reach. It seems like the design of multilateral design to help sustain stability in countries, not to intervene in conflicts in countries in conflict. This is one of the examples. The other issue was COVID-19. When we witnessed the rise of nationalism, border closed, every country focused on their, and we saw each rich countries supporting rich countries. Nobody see the countries in conflict. And we were shocked about the numbers that we have it in intensive care units. We don't have any capacity, we don't have money, but we gather all the support, and we came out of this COVID stronger. We have 5 times intensive care units. Actually, we have a weak healthcare system. During the war, there is no investments, but at least we survived that. The only initiative at that time was COVAX. It's one of the successful for vaccines. It was one of the successful initiatives.
The WHO international effort to buy the vaccines.
Yes,
and
for countries in conflict. But this is the only one. Before that, it was the rise of nationalism. There is no, not even, it was that time, even multilateral and bilateral wasn't the minimum. If the interventions by multilateral system, it's humble. If we can use a nice word, but there is no clear interventions can supporting the countries in conflict. The Saudis have initiative in G20 at that time to debt forbearance, but it didn't complete until we see, or following, until we say debt relief. Other examples always championed by different countries. India, for example, championed the Sri Lanka debt relief, restructuring and relief, it support Sri Lanka. France and Sudan, 2 years or 3 years ago, it's supporting the government for debt and restructuring after turmoils and political instability. Unfortunately, Sudan now in a critical situation. But do we need a champion for that? Anne Kruger, the former chief economist in World Bank, and she's a former senior official in IMF, argued that it's important to have a system for that, to address these issues for countries in conflict, instituted, not to be championed by countries. That's why we need to consider that. Countries like Yemen, we have a lot of debt. We're now restructuring our internal debt, but we have big country, 500,000 kilometers, approximately 30 million, one of the humanitarian biggest crisis. We need to work to support state institutions. So the pillar of the stability is the state institutions. The humanitarian economy, I definitely agree that that is important for humanitarian interventions. But we don't want the humanitarian economy seize the real economy, which can affect the resilience of the private sector and also the community. We have 135,000 settlements over the mountains, coast, and different places. This network of providing food is by private sector, which face a lot of difficulties because of militias, what's happening in Sana'a, with the banking system, with the private sector, created a lot of difficulties and depleted all the resilience in the private sector, which keep the country surviving until now. So if the currency collapse, actually its depreciation of the currency is 20% now, really comparing to the value before the war, but in different countries in 2 years, maybe less, reach to 5% or less than that. So in Yemen, at least, central bank, institutions, government as a national entity built by consensus and Riyadh agreement, keeping things floating until we can reach to solid foundation for a political process. Ironically, now the support is in the minimum. We have truce, we have some think that we have a prosperous future of peace. But why is the support economically and humanitarily is less than the years ago? It seems that we need support now more than any time ever, until we can find and reach solid foundation for a political process. Spoilers will always use a collapse, economic situation, services to make bad moves. And this is, we cannot control. Always the power sharing, the partnership, because in Yemen we need consensus, we need to sit on the table as Yemenis and solve all the problems. So we have also success stories, small issues with the World Bank. We started programs. World Bank always intervene after the peace process, but we started 5 years ago with the IDA and World Bank programs, not only on social welfare fund, but also in integrated urban services, helping the capacity or building the capacity of the cities so we can give the people a glimpse of hope.
Okay, so your comments have underlined, what is, one of the key problems is that it's a piecemeal approach, whether it's for the food shocks stemming from the Ukraine war, whether it's COVID, whether it's debt restructuring. There was an article by Chatham House's own Faria al-Muslimi who years ago said, what Yemen needs is a Marshall Plan. You need a big, broad, ambitious plan. And if instead of me from the BBC was sitting here, but the head of the United Nations in Yemen, and they would say, Mr. Prime Minister, you're doing a better job, Mr. Prime Minister. Instead of some of your predecessors, you're spending your time in Aden, your capital for now, instead of in Riyadh. So you're on the ground, but you don't have enough money to pay your salaries. The security situation remains volatile, and some of your partners in government, the government is very, very fragile. So you don't have the capacity to be able to launch this kind of a Marshall Plan. What would you say to the UN if he or she was sitting right here now?
It's an ambitious plan, Marshall Plan, when I'm architect, we need to rebuild our
You want to kind of a Marshall Plan?
But now we need to survive until we reach Marshall Plan. Because if we collapse in this critical period, there is nothing to build on. Sometimes I call it, my mission is to keep the DNA of the state until we reach a real peace process. Because militias, territorial disputes, And that's why in Yemen we didn't fall in total chaos. There is no massacres, we have radicals, and if we lose the government, the space will be filled by radicals, racists and religious radicals like Houthis and others in other places. So it's always, war always brings the worst.
Well, since you brought up losing the government, the last time Chatham House focused on Yemen, General Zubaydi, who is head of the Southern Transitional Council, the STC, one of your partners in government, he said the government's incapable of carrying out its tasks. We need a new government. Is your government also at the risk of collapse right now?
Always the government.
Is it now?
Always the government blames in every country. First things is to blame the government.
That's just rhetoric.
It's happened in Sudan, happened in every place.
It's not on the record.
But I think he's a partner.
Yes.
Idris Zabidi is a prominent figure in the PLC, and also he had members with me in the government. So if the government survive or collapse, that the questions who gonna, we have to take responsibilities and we have to talk on the table. Even of supporting the government or building a new government, it should be by consensus. We should all sit on the table. So I think there is enough wisdom inside the PLC, and there are most important political figures, military figures, to sit and talk and how we can survive. So I think there is always a way to solve it.
Since you're an architect, you have to get your own house in order first. And then secondly, when it comes to money, when we think about Yemen, it's not multilateral. We think about multiple neighbors meddling in Yemen with all of their different interests. In the south, that has predominantly been the Saudis and the Emiratis. The Saudis have made this dramatic move now to a rapprochement with Iran, talking to the Houthis without including you. They're not just the main player in the war, they're your main funder. Are you confident that they will continue to provide you the kind of support that you need, including the budgetary support that you're now calling for here today?
There is many questions in the same questions.
Saudi Arabia, are you confident? Are you confident in them?
We are confident in our allies. First of all, politically, even with the deal with Iran, the indicator of success to this deal to success is Yemen. We have many files in the region and many intersections, but I think Yemen is the most important file to witness if there is a progress or not on that. So we are confident about our allies. The Saudis want real political process and peace process and then support. But I always want the support now and after. We cannot delay. Yemen can't wait. Now we are discussing with the Saudi bilaterally the trench of supporting the budget. And first trench.
They've delayed. They promised it months ago.
Yes, months ago, but I think we are in a final stage. Part of it also, we will pay the debt of some regional development funds. It will resume the work of multilateral, like social Arab funds, some Kuwaiti funds, some other funds. We have debt to pay for them because we only paid the debt of IDA. We don't have a big external debt. It's below $7 billion US. So the first tranche with the Saudis, we argued it will be without conditions. It's not a deposit in the central bank. So this is the one issue. With the Emirates, we have some support in electricity, in alternatives, and solar panel. But the most important thing, as you're beginning your question, I need political stability parallel also to the economic support. If I have money without political stability, no way that the money can help in our economy. But we rely on that support from our bilateral with our friends. But it also need kind of multilateral support to keep Yemen from free falling.
Yes, because
we are in this summer we are in very critical situation. The government will face consequences. Not only the government, all the political system in PLC.
Yeah, Faria was saying before this that July is the most dangerous month
Always.
in Yemen because the heat.
Yeah, it's a nightmare.
Yeah. And electricity
shortages. Services, investments, and electricity need political stability. It's hard to solve accumulated problems for decades in 2 or 3 years. So we are working hard, but it will take time. It needs patience. So we need everybody on tracks.
So political stability really is fundamental for any kind of development in Yemen. It depends on the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Yemenis, but it also depends on Iran, which has been a key backer of the Houthis. Do you trust Iran?
No, I don't trust Iran. I trust, to be honest, after even the Saudi-Iranian agreement, there is no clear messages. They have, I think, from the radicals, they support the militias in the region. What I'm concerned is Yemen. We need more pressure so we have truce. It's going to be sustained or not. Do we going to reach ceasefire and then political process? It depends, because Houthis is funded by oil derivatives, oil, gas, cooking gas. They have it's not only weapon, it's economic also support. So we need to be careful about that. But I hope that we find the positive messages, but until now we don't have trust.
And do you believe the Houthis genuinely want a national dialogue? They're ready to share power?
Everybody is tired of the war, Houthis and others. So I think, but also we are ready in the government for any alternatives. We cannot, the peace comes when the aggressors stop and realize it's enough. We are losing capacity, we are losing education, universities. It's hard for me as a prime minister to witness all of this. I cannot do anything. I cannot work in my natural resources. The terrorist attack on oil crude exports affect us. We need money. We build like 3 or 4 universities. We need to spend on them. I need to raise the salaries, but I cannot. I don't want to print, so I don't want to go inflation. That's why we are working in this budget support trench with the Saudis. So Yemen can be saved with the minimum requirements. And then we will move to Marshall Plan that far. But at least we need to keep the capacity so we can build on. Mm-hmm. If we fall, the bailout will be tremendous. 3 issues: currency, salaries, and minimum services. These are the main things for us, the government, yes.
So you use the word pillars. At one point you said pillars and killers, which is probably pillars and pillars are probably a really good, a nice way to, because it's the 2 sides of the coin. But you need the basics. You need to be able to pay people. You need to have the fuel to keep the electricity on. You need people to have money. You need political stability, and you need the world's multilateral organizations, all of which say they want to help you, try to move beyond this kind of giving you handouts to keep feeding people, because that has a distortion on your economy. Does anyone else want to bring a question into this conversation? It's got to be a good question. This gentleman here with the wise beard. Oh, there's 2 men with wise beards. Oh, they're sitting together. 2 gray beards are together. Yeah, okay. You can compete for the best question. Go ahead. And your name, please.
Member of Chatham House, also international lawyer.
Oh.
Prime Minister, your country is in conflict and in crisis, and hundreds of thousands of people, I believe, have been killed during this crisis. This is a war crime inflicted on Yemen internally and externally. Will you cooperate by United Nations and International Criminal Court if they ask you to do so?
Didn't you ask that question last week at the last session on Yemen?
Yes. That was a different version.
That's okay, it's a good question. It's not quite on topic, but okay. Let's try the other gray beard. Let's see.
I really appreciate you referring to us as wise.
Well, that's wise, that's wise. And you gentleman, your name is?
John Paul Rosario, Chatham House member. Mr. Prime Minister, I understand that Yemen will not have safe drinking water by 2035. And I was wondering what the government was going to be doing to address this matter.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Water is the essence of life. Very good question. I think we just need a very short answer for the record, whether you would cooperate with the ICC on war crimes, your government.
We have a panel of experts now, and they're working, and there is support from the government. And we have also the independent committee for investigation and all. So this is one of the things that the government always deal with, the panel of experts, and also...
Good, okay. Water, is that on your list of urgent?
Water is it's really important and absent. Yemen, always, before the war, decades ago, the issue of the water is it's the pressing issue. All the population in mountains and coastal area, but suffering from lack of water. But nobody talked about it during the war. All our basins, our water resources, when I was discussing also the constitutions and national dialogue, this is one of the things, it might be raise fights between governorates. And if we work even in decentralization, the people in populations and concentrations is different between places. So we need to take real consideration about water issues in Yemen.
Is that something you need, that World
Yes,
Bank,
Yemen,
that's the kind of long-term project that you...
Not long-term. In the short-term, water will be the pressing issue. We want some
But the multilateral the aid agencies are looking at it?
We have good programs. We have also good ministers in water, but he cannot work strategically. We have small wash projects. Humanitarily, it's $2 million, $3 million for each project. But we have a big populations. We have to look about distribution of water and also population inside the country. But during the war, this is not it's an important question, but really Yemen is one of the most countries threatened by the water issue.
Okay, we've got just a few now. The Blackbeards think the Greybeards didn't do good enough, so we're going to take a question here.
Thank you. Hisham Al-Ghannam, Naif Arab University for Security Sciences. It's rather a specific question to His Excellency that requires a direct answer. Would China play a positive role in what's happening now in Yemen? Would they convince or maybe influence or maybe pressure Abdulmalik al-Houthi to engage in a serious political process? China is engaged in mega and giga projects in the whole region. So someone would expect that China would play some sort of a role in the coming days and months.
Okay, thank you. Could China? That's the last thing you need is even more countries coming in with their own interests. But having said that,
they are jumping in.
Yes,
they are jumping.
They are jumping in.
I think there is many participations or mediations on that, but until now there is no results that we can find.
I'm going to bring in a question that's come in from, because this goes right to the heart of this session, from Clyde Collins at Aston University. Can you provide examples or evidence of instances where multilateral approaches have successfully addressed conflicts and humanitarian crises, and what factors contributed to their success? You mentioned Sudan, where we did see the collapse, so that's not a very good example. But is it, because obviously in areas of conflict, it's hard for humanitarian actors to operate, as it is for governments to operate because of the security concerns. Can you think of one where they did make...
Actually, it triggers some ideas in my mind, because some conditions is not apply on the conflict countries. So we need to design something. Until now, there is no design for that.
Okay.
Even the conditional aid for Yemen is designed from people thousands of miles of Yemen. And it's tailored case by case. Yemen is not like Sudan, Sudan like Libya. It's different countries. In Africa or Asia or different countries. So we need to tailor everything. But we need to design something, because governance or some conditions, it's not applied in the country in war. As my practice as a prime minister for 5 years, there is difficulties. Nobody wants strong government. Always there is powers want to seize revenues, problems between central government and governorates, issues. So all that issues, we need to enhance the capacity. I know the issues of corruptions, others, governance always raise. But we need, for the multilateral system, to think. That's why I said in the beginning in the remarks, always the interventions on to keep the country sustainable or sustain or stability. But there is no interventions for country falling and problems. So what's happening in Sudan, it helps the government. Unfortunately, the government failed because different actors internally. But it helps the government to work in the financial issues. It released the debt. It helped them to... when they succeed, they throw out the government. So it's always, we need to think about design or new design for multilateral interventions in conflict countries.
The fact that you're mentioning that here means that you've thought about it. Have you had any positive response when you have spoken that they are, can you see evidence that they're moving in that direction, understanding that in the complex wars of our time, that they need to look in different approaches.
As I said, some examples have India was care about
Yes.
Sri Lanka, so
But
they
that's
intervened.
not
Yemen is between the Arab League and Gulf countries. We should maybe see kind of multilateral. We discussed that with the GCC countries. They said we have a plans of reconstruction after, but what's now? Always I have that debate with the GCC and others. So we need now and then later. But now everybody, they don't think about it. So sometimes we have our bilateral relation with the Saudis, with others, to keep things moving, especially with this pressing needs after the head of crude oil exports.
Yes, and your very damning comment said so diplomatically, nobody wants a strong government. You know, unfortunately, Yemen has too many governments. I think I'm going to look for a signal from the chair. I think we're 2:36. Is it time to end, or sadly? I want to give you one last, just the very last. I started off by talking about using the phrase used by the United Nations, cautious hope. Do you share in this cautious hope for Yemen?
Oh, we need to. Always the United Nations, in the special envoy, I said this is their job. They have always.
Yes. And
precious
you, the
hope.
Prime Minister?
Yes.
Embattled Prime Minister?
Yes, I saw it's a dark scenarios, but as a Prime Minister, we need to keep motivated so our people in Yemen, our citizens, can see a brighter future, that everybody is tired of war. So again, state institutions, resilient of a community, resilient of private sector. This is what's keep at least the pillars of stability until we find a solid foundation for the political process.
You've got a very, very tough job. But ladies and gentlemen, when he got to the stage, he turned aside the lectern, he put aside his notes, he spoke to you directly. It's a sign that he wants to get down to business. Thank you very much, all of you, for listening so closely.
Thank you.